Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the Between Tides podcast. My name is Alison, and we're so glad that you can join us today. Whether you're a certified fan or it's your first time with us, the goal is actually pretty simple. We want to educate, encourage, inspire, and maybe even help you be a little bit healthier after listening to each episode. Today, I'm joined by Tammie Kephart, who's a registered dietitian. Thanks for joining us today. And we're going to kind of explore the topic of the history of diet fads and diet culture. So I think it'll be a pretty good one.
I think so too. I am excited to talk about this.
Yeah.
We did some deep dives and I found out some interesting information about the history of fad diets.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate being on the program and having a chance to talk through this.
Good. Well, thanks for joining us. Let's get into it. Yeah, so I think about diets as being very restrictive.
And that's usually what most people think of. So I found it really interesting when I did this deep dive, how far back it goes. Back into the ancient and classical periods. So Hippocrates, who we all know him as the father of medicine, he emphasized diet and exercise, but it was for health.
Okay.
It wasn't the diet that we tend to think of today. And he advocated moderation over indulgence.
Yeah.
And then it kind of switched to more in the religious vein during the medieval and Renaissance periods.
Yeah.
So the church was looking at diet, but again, it wasn't diet the way we think of. It became more culturally significant in the church, more about piety, discipline,
So like
and
fasting?
purity. Yes.
Okay.
Fasting so that you're recognizing and you're honoring God through your body and your dietary intake. And then from there, you were deemed to be pious, or disciplined. So it took on that type of a meaning. During the 1700s and 1800s is when we started to see a bit of a change. There was a rise in terms of body image and also self-control. So the first celebrity dieter, which I thought was kind of interesting, was William Banting.
Okay.
Right? He was an English undertaker.
Oh.
Yes. And
He just didn't want to lift heavy caskets.
I guess not.
That was his
That
thing.
is true. So back in 1863, he published the Letter of Corpusculence. Or not corpusculence, corpulence. I'm sorry, corpulence. Yes.
I feel like either way conveys.
So, it's a little different. But, but the first commercial weight loss plan came from William Banting. And he became known as the father of dieting. He was nominated. I can't even talk today.
That's okay.
He was associated with dieting. And basically, we were looking during that period of time at cutting carbs, cutting sugars, associating thinness with morality.
Got it.
And obesity with indulgence.
But what's interesting about that is I thought in that time period that to be plump was actually considered almost like a mark of beauty because it meant you were wealthy. Nobility, they were a little bit more plump. Women would pad themselves out to look plump if they weren't naturally plump. So that's interesting that also at the same time, you have this idea of wanting to be not corpulent.
Yes. Yes. And I agree with you because that's what, during that time period, men were looking for larger sized women who had some flesh on their body.
They like themselves some curves.
That's right. They like curves. And also what you stated, that they figured the women had money and wealth, and they would be marrying somebody who could provide or they could provide for without too much issue.
Yeah.
So it was a different take, and that's probably why it was such a huge thing at the time, because it kind of went against the grain. Yeah. So you really could say that's probably the first fad diet that was out there. Yes.
It really does go to show you that history repeats itself and human nature is pretty constant or static throughout history.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you see repetition. If you go back through the decades and you start to look at what was popular, you're going to see repetition. And then in the early 20th century, that's when we really started to see the birth of modern diet culture.
Yeah, like the
we
industry.
think of today.
All right. I'm going to stop you right there.
Okay.
Because I created a little pop quiz.
Oh, no. Okay.
So when I was thinking about this episode, I was thinking back to my childhood. I'm Gen X, which I assume you're Gen X as well.
I'm baby boomer.
Are you? Okay.
Yeah.
But you're probably right
At the
on
very
the cusp
end.
there.
Yeah.
So, you remember the 70s and 80s and 90s. Like there was a big, especially in the 90s, huge boom in like infomercials and products and diet culture. So I did a little research of my own, which is far less scholarly.
Okay.
And I'm going to give you 10 true or false questions.
All right.
If these are real diets that existed or do exist, or if I made them up. All right.
Okay.
So just, real or made up.
Okay.
So number 1, the cigarette diet. Do you think that's real or made up?
That one is real.
Yes. Here was the tagline: reach for a smoke instead of a sweet.
Yes.
And obviously it could work, because if you want something to do, put something in your mouth, you could put a cigarette in there and not eat.
Yes.
You're going to know this one. I know, because you're going to know it.
Okay.
The grapefruit diet.
That one's true.
It's absolutely true. And I remember my mom going on the grapefruit diet and other friends' moms. Like it was a big fad in the early 80s.
And it still comes around.
It still comes around. So it was known as the Hollywood diet as well. And it was, it actually originated, I think, in the 50s. And the belief was that there were enzymes in citrus that helped to burn fat. And thereby, if you had half a grapefruit before a meal, you would eat less and burn more calories. I don't think that there's really any truth to that. There may be enzymes that do that, but they're such small quantities that it's not going to have an effect on you.
Right.
Next one, the cabbage soup diet.
And that one is real as well.
Also real, yes. Also, my mom did this one. I can remember her making vats of cabbage soup on a Saturday.
Oh, wow.
So that she would have it to eat off of during the week. And she literally, that's all she ate when she was on the diet, morning, noon, and night. Mm-hmm. So of course you lose weight, because it doesn't fill you up and it doesn't have a lot of calories.
No, you figure cabbage is very low in calories. Mm-hmm. So it's basically a starvation diet.
It is
what it is.
Yeah. I can't imagine she was even eating 1,000 calories a day.
Probably not.
Which I'm sure she wasn't on very long. And she was probably really crabby, because I'm crabby when I'm hungry, and we were a lot alike.
Aren't we all?
Number 4, the baby food diet. You basically just eat 12 to 14 jars of baby food a day.
That one is true.
It is true.
Yep.
Supposedly became popularized by Jennifer Aniston. I don't know if that's true or not. Her fitness guru, Tracy Anderson, who's pretty well known in the fitness world. Yeah, the diet consisted of eating up to 14 jars of baby food a day to replace snacks and meals. It would be low in calories, and it would have a lot of nutritional components in the baby food, but I can't imagine it would at all be filling or satisfying or healthy.
No, you're still missing nutrients. Plus you're missing fiber.
Yeah.
So you may have issues with constipation.
Yeah. Because they're all iron fortified.
Yes.
So that means you're going to be real constipated, I would think.
Yes.
Yeah.
And would it satisfy you?
No.
Why would you be satisfied eating something that's pureed, versus being able to eat a real food?
Yeah, and it tastes like iron. I don't think baby food tastes very good. When my kids were little, I tasted it.
Yeah.
Now, the only time I remember my mom buying baby food was when my brother, I think, had dental surgery and had to eat soft foods, and that was a good substitute.
Right.
Ugh. The egg yolk diet.
That one, I have not heard of it, so I will say it's false.
You are correct. I made it up. I was thinking of Rocky in the Rocky movies, when he has every morning he has egg yolks pureed with orange juice, I think.
Yes. Well, and also there's health issues involved with that.
Yeah.
Rocky kind of made it popular. Mm-hmm. And then there used to be a commercial juice place in malls that would make smoothies and juices, if you remember that.
I do.
They would ask, do you want a raw egg in your juice or your smoothie? Yeah. And so then you need to be concerned about salmonella.
Right. Because you don't know, especially in a commercial establishment, you don't know the provenance of the eggs.
Right.
If I'm getting I actually do get eggs from someone local, and I know her chickens are healthy and she's monitoring that. And so, if I was going to eat a raw egg, which I wouldn't, I definitely feel a little bit more confident with that. Okay, number 6, the sexy pineapple diet.
Oh, that one I've not heard of either. I would say, because of the title, I would say it's true.
It is true.
Yes.
I think this was bigger in the UK. I never heard of it either.
Okay.
The diet's straightforward. You eat nothing but pineapple 2 days a week. And the result is that you lose weight, you have more energy and more stamina for other activities. And supposedly it works. But I can eat 4 cubes of pineapple before my tongue gets all weird. So I can't imagine.
Pineapple for 2 days straight?
No.
And again, you're starving yourself.
Yeah.
You might be well hydrated.
Yeah.
Right. but you're starving yourself.
Get a lot of vitamin C or whatever pineapples have. Okay, the cocaine diet, number 7.
I would say that one is true.
Yeah, so this one is actually semi-true. I've watched a few documentaries about supermodels in the 80s and 90s, and several of them have admitted that to keep their weight off, instead of having a snack, they would have like a bump of cocaine and it kind of suppress their appetite, which cocaine is speed. Is that right?
Yeah.
I can never remember which is which, but this isn't on the diet, but you remember Dexatrim in the 80s was an amphetamine, which is why you can't get it anymore.
Yes.
To suppress the appetite. So.
Yeah. The amphetamines were really popular like 60s, 70s, and they were uncontrolled.
No.
Anybody could get them,
You could crush them, snort them.
Yep.
Whatever.
Yes.
Okay, number 8, the AIDS candy diet.
I'd say that one is true. I do remember those AIDS candy.
Yes.
Yes.
So this was AIDS spelled AYDS. My mom had these as well. They were a chewy, almost like a caramel chew. And they tasted like chocolate or caramel. I think maybe those were the 2 flavors. And they were supposed to suppress your appetite. I don't know if they worked, but that was probably the early 80s. So when the AIDS epidemic became a big news story, they completely fell out of favor. And I think the company went bankrupt. So
that's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. I never knew what happened to them. My mom also had those.
Yeah.
And I think they were actually popular back in the 70s too.
Okay.
Because I can remember as a kid, she would have them. My sister and I thought they were candy.
Oh, me too. My mom had them in a
pop
purse and I would eat one because it tasted good. But
Yes.
so they were marketed as appetite suppressing candy. They were like chalky caramels with a whiff of medicinal aftertaste. But I'm guessing that wasn't in the marketing materials.
Probably not.
Number 9, the sleeping beauty diet.
That one is true.
It is true. I'd never heard of this one. So the idea was instead of eating, you can sleep through your hunger. It was a dangerous fad that involved taking sedatives to stay asleep, sometimes for days at a time, which I don't know what kind of lifestyle that you live that you can just sleep like that. But Elvis Presley was rumored to be a fan of this diet. Don't recommend any of these diets, but I definitely don't recommend that one. And then the last one is the caffeine diet. It's basically a liquid diet that you drink a lot of beverages like coffee, Diet Coke, things like that have caffeine in them to lose weight.
I would say that one is false.
Yeah, I made it up.
Yeah.
Although, they did market a lot of diuretics. They maybe still do. They're largely caffeine pills to supposedly increase your metabolism and help you shed water weight. Yeah. Also not recommended.
Yes. And they still market caffeine in different products for that same purpose.
Yeah.
A lot of the diet products that are out there have the caffeine in it.
Yeah. I can tell you just as a general personal testimony, there have been times when I've had a lot of caffeine and I have not lost any weight.
No.
I might go to the bathroom a lot, but doesn't
go to
work.
the bathroom and can't sleep.
Yeah.
So, yes.
No, that is also true.
Yes. If you have too much caffeine, I'm up all night prowling, but it doesn't lead to weight loss anyway.
It does not. No, it just makes you jittery and unhappy.
And cranky. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So go ahead. Like you were getting into the 20th century, and I feel like that's when we really pick up into some craziness.
Yes. That's when a lot of those types of diets started to appear. So calorie counting gained popularity. Up until that point in the early 20th century, we weren't really focused so much on calorie counting, but that started to gain popularity. There were slimming salons and laxatives and appetite suppressing pills. And when
Yes.
Hollywood glamorized the slender figure,
Yeah.
so that's when we started to see a change
Yeah.
in what women thought
Yes.
they should look like.
And a couple of peak times for that slender frame. So I know the 20s, the roaring 20s was a big, maybe the first time in sort of recorded photographical history when women were actually binding their chests to have a more boyish figure. They were, I'm sure the diet craze started, and it was probably really horrible ways to lose weight. And then after the 20s, another time I remember that being a big craze was sort of the heroin chic of the early 90s or mid 90s. So in the 80s and 90s, we had a lot of supermodels who were kind of like beautiful Amazons. They had great figures. They were not skinny by today's standards. They were certainly not overweight, but they were like what I would consider built. You know, they had strong figures. You could see their muscle definition. You know, they were kind of gave off this powerful vibe.
Right.
Love the supermodels of like that time period. And then you have Kate Moss comes into play, and she ushers in I think the mid to late 90s, this idea of heroin chic. And it was a little bit of unfair criticism for her because that was her natural frame, I think, at the time. I do think she had struggles with narcotics later, but all of the billboards, all of the print ads, everything just went to this waif looking slender frame. So those were kind of two like really peak times. I remember that thinness was like extreme thinness was popular.
Think about though, even before that, like the 1950s, who was the bombshell?
Yeah. I mean, like Marilyn Monroe,
she
Jane
had,
Mansfield, they were stacked.
Very beautiful hourglass
Yes.
figures, you know, that everybody kind of envied and went after.
Actual hips and actual butt, you know, like they were considered the womanly ideal.
But who appeared on the scene in the 60s?
Twiggy.
So that would be the Kate Moss of the 60s, I would say.
You're right.
You know, very, very thin, androgynous frame. She looked like a boy.
Yeah.
You know, everything kind of just hung off of her. And that was the
Yeah.
new look. That's what was being marketed to females as this is what you want to look like.
And here's the thing. If your frame is like that, that's not a bad thing. You know, we're not criticizing Twiggy or Kate Moss or anyone who has a frame like that. The problem becomes when we take one body type and make it the ideal and then say, here's what everybody has to match. And if you're someone who has natural hips and you have an hourglass figure, or you tend to be a little bit on the larger side, or on the athletic side, you know, you're an athlete and you have very defined muscles and you maybe have a bulkier frame, that's fine.
Right.
Like what is with us that this is what we do as a culture, and we swing the pendulum back and forth, because if you weren't built like Marilyn Monroe, that's fine too. If she was the standard.
Right.
But, you know, you were probably padding out your bras and your undergarments so that you did have this, you know, hourglass frame. So yeah, you can't win as a woman.
You can't. And most of the, well, let me say this. Who basically influences us as females? Who tells us what we're supposed to look like?
Yeah.
You know, it's the media, it's the advertising. And then on top of that, you start having various companies that came on the scene. Like back in the 50s to the 70s, that's whenever commercial dieting and the weight loss boom started really taking off. So Weight Watchers was founded in 1963. Now, I don't have anything against Weight Watchers.
Sure.
They're a great company.
Yeah.
Because they do recognize different body types.
Yes.
They encourage healthier eating.
Yes.
But that was something that they jumped on to say, hey, there's a need for this because people are trying to lose weight. They're not happy with the way they look.
Yeah.
How can we help them? You know, and so then other companies, of course, followed with that as well.
Yeah,
We
you
have
have like Jenny Craig, I remember.
Slim Fast.
Yeah. Which is still around. I mean, you can still go to the grocery store and buy Slim Fast. And I actually think there's a place for those, because sometimes you need something quick that has some nutritional benefit that you can just replace a meal. But as a lifestyle, you just can't maintain that the rest of your life.
No.
And I think anything that you can only do in the short term is really not going to solve whatever problem it is you're trying to solve.
Right. But that's what fad diets focus on.
Yeah.
You know, it's not only weight loss is a small part of that.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's more like, so what's the focus of the diet? Is it going to be high carb? Is it going to be high protein?
Yeah.
Is it going to be low fat? You know, with low sugars? What are we going to look at as some of the focus? And some of those diets that you mentioned, like the grapefruit diet, the cabbage soup diet, the Scarsdale diet, those are all examples of fad diets that had a particular focus.
Remind me what the Scarsdale diet was.
It's high protein, low carb, only 1,000 calories a day.
Oh.
Yeah. And females, you need about 1,400 calories a day in order to meet all of your nutritional needs and to be healthy. So 1,000 calories a day is very low.
No, and I remember in college trying to lose weight, and I did, again, I'm not recommending this to anybody. I did a slim fast in the morning, and I did like a prepackaged low-calorie frozen meal for lunch. No, I take that back. For lunch, I had a 70-calorie thing of non-fat yogurt. That was it. And maybe a piece of fruit.
Okay.
And then I had a low-calorie frozen meal for supper. And then I went and I would jog for an hour. And I bet I was under 900 calories a day because I didn't know. I had no idea what the recommended calorie allowance was. I just knew if I felt starving, it was working, which is so unhealthy. It's so bad, and it's so not sustainable.
No.
Sure, I lost weight, and I did get a little bit more fit. I was exercising, but it was not at all healthy. And of course, once I started eating like a normal person again, you gain the weight back.
Yeah.
And so it worked for a little while, but...
And that's really what happens with most of the fad diets because it's yo-yo effect. You know, if you think of some of the celebrities who have been out there and they'll lose a bunch of weight and then 6 months later, they've put it back on.
Yeah.
And a lot of times you put on more weight than what you lost with that yo-yo effect.
Yeah.
You're actually healthier just to get at a set point weight. Like your body has a set point where you feel pretty healthy. You don't have to do a lot to maintain that weight.
Yeah.
That's kind of your normal body weight.
Yeah, I do feel like I've thought that for a while, that your body has sort of like a window of weight where it likes to be. And it may not be where you would like it to be, but it's where your body is most functional and happy. But yeah, like Oprah was a big one. I remember back in, I think it was like 86 or something, she went on a liquid diet and lost a ton of weight. And I remember the episode where she came out in a size whatever pair of jeans. She'd never fit into that size pair of jeans before. She pulled out, I think, a wagon that had all of the weight mimicked that she had lost.
Okay.
And it was this big thing. And I mean, within weeks, she was gaining the weight back. And she's talked about that as being such an unhealthy and unsustainable way of losing weight. And Kirstie Alley, I remember different times where she lost weight and gained weight. And there are other celebrities too. But yeah, it's a thing. It's definitely, I remember my mom going on a liquid diet. It was supervised by her doctor.
Okay.
I think it was the Cambridge diet because I was looking up like doctor supervised liquid diets, and that was like the first one that popped up. And I think she spent a summer doing it. She lost so much weight. She loved how she looked. But as soon as she started eating food again, it came back.
Yeah. The problem with the fad diets, you're not learning to make any modifications or changes.
Yeah.
Okay. They're gimmicky. You know, they're usually fairly expensive.
Yeah.
Because they might be selling some type of a product or a cookbook. They have celebrities who endorse them. Well, you and I know the celebrities are not basically like us. Most of them have their own trainers too, right?
Yep.
They can eat whatever they want to, regardless of the cost, which most of us can't do.
Right.
You know, expensive to follow, but you're not learning to retrain your eating habits or your lifestyle habits.
Yeah.
So whenever you go off it, because eventually you're going to, and that's really what the diet companies are banking on, because they're not going to make money if it works, right?
Right. Yeah.
You have to have something that people are going to jump on the bandwagon and go, oh, I'm going to try this diet, you know, for maybe 6 months, and then they kind of fall off of it. And then the next thing comes along and they try that as well.
Yeah. That's so true. So what, you know, looking at where we are today in 2025, which my 1986-year-old kid self would have been like not even able to fathom the year 2025. But I don't feel like we've come a long way. I feel like maybe we've made some progress, but what are some of the fads that you see right now out there?
Right now, I think you're still seeing some of the old fads, the zone diet,
Yeah.
the caveman diet. You're also seeing Atkins, South
Yep.
Beach. Those have come around again and again and again. There might be a little change to them.
Yeah.
They're still fad diets. They still work the same way. You're restricting a certain type of food or nutrient, in order to lose weight.
Yeah.
And you do
Yeah.
at first.
Yeah. They
But
work.
then you can't sustain it and you gain it back.
Yeah.
But there's also been a little bit more of a shift towards low carb versus low fat.
Yes.
Low fat used to be really the ideal diet to follow. Do you
Yes.
remember like Snackwell's
Yes.
had, yeah.
I must have eaten packages of Snackwells thinking I'm losing weight.
Yes, yeah. And that's the problem. There's a couple issues with the low fat diet because, you think, oh, it's low fat. I can eat more of it because it's low fat.
Yeah.
But then think about fat. What does fat do? When we eat food that's higher in fat, how does it feel in your mouth?
It feels like thick, like it coats your mouth.
It does. It gives you sort of a mouth feel. It also helps to keep you full for a longer period of time. It's very satisfying to eat foods that have fat in them.
Yeah.
So if you take that fat out.
Yes, it is.
Yes, it is. If you take the fat out, you're losing taste.
Yeah.
So what are you going to do to replace that taste?
Sugar and salt.
Sugar and salt.
Yeah.
Yes. So really, those products, those fat-free products that were really popular, even though they were low in fat,
Yeah.
they still had a lot of sugar in them. So they weren't healthy,
Do you remember? I can't remember the name of it, but I know it started with an O, and it was a fat substitute that they started.
Olestra.
Yes.
Yes.
And that stuff did a number on your intestines. If you ate like potato chips that were cooked in that, you better be near a bathroom for the next 10 hours.
Yeah.
Like it was bad.
Yes.
Yeah.
It wasn't absorbed. So
Okay.
if you ate it, it just went directly through you. And then they found that people who tended to eat a lot of products with the Olestra in it, started having some deficiencies with the fat-soluble vitamins because they weren't being absorbed.
They needed the fat.
Yeah, they were just
We'll
going
eat
straight
anything
through.
if it promises us like to lose weight. What's wrong with us?
Yeah.
Here's another side effect that I remember because when the low fat diet was big, I was either just getting ready to start having kids or I had young kids, and I was at a conference and I went to a seminar where a woman, a nutritionist and a dietitian, was talking about the fact that growing children, babies and children, really need certain kinds of healthy fats for especially brain development, organ development. Just they need that for their bodies. And so a little side effect that was really damaging, I think, to that low fat fad is that low fat started creeping in places where you didn't necessarily expect it. So we started having low fat yogurts. Kids were being fed low fat milk when they needed those high fats that are in those dairy products, in cheeses and milks and things for good physical and cognitive development. And they weren't getting it. And so I know that studies were done after the fact to determine were there effects on that. And I mean, I'm not an expert and I don't know, but I do know that we have a lot more children after that time period who were, needing special services and IEPs and had cognitive and learning disorders in school. And you kind of have to wonder, was there a cause and effect there? I don't know.
Yeah,
but
I don't know either.
It's interesting to think about.
It would be interesting to do some research and see if anybody's delved into it.
Yeah.
Especially the first, from birth to year 1, of course, formula or breast milk.
Yeah.
And then from 1 to 2, whole milk definitely was always what the pediatricians recommended.
Yes.
But then the low-fat diet came on the scene and parents were thinking, okay, we'll go with skim instead.
Yeah, that's healthier.
And actually, when they look back now, there really wasn't any scientific evidence-based backing to say we need to avoid all high-fat foods.
Yeah.
And we have sort of shifted now. We've realized that some fats needed in the diet, some fats healthy.
Yes.
If you want to drink whole milk, that's okay. You just need to do everything in moderation.
Yeah.
And proportionality.
Yeah.
And balance.
Yeah.
But now we know it's more carbs. It's more the sugars
Yeah,
that we
the
want to
refined
look
carbs.
at.
Yeah.
The refined carbs, the sugars. Yeah. You want to focus on the least processed as possible, the whole grains. Those are healthy.
Yeah.
You know?
And like getting your bulk from, fruits and vegetables, things that have high fiber, they have natural nutritive benefits, and they
Right.
are going to fill you up mixed with protein. Like that's actually become my favorite way to eat is mixing a lean protein or a healthy protein like chicken, fish, whatever, with like a lot of vegetables, like roasted, fresh, whatever. I do a lot of salads. I do a lot of, like I brought leftovers today. I did like a pork tenderloin for dinner last night with roasted potatoes. People stay away from potatoes, but potatoes are really good for you.
Yeah, potatoes are good for you.
If you add lashings of butter and sour cream and cream cheese,
Right.
perhaps not.
Right.
But I love roasting potatoes in olive oil and seasonings, a little bit of butter, and Brussels sprouts are just my favorite. And so like I'm so excited to eat lunch today because I brought leftovers.
That sounds good.
Yeah. But it's like a perfect mix of,
Yeah.
for me, protein, carbs, fiber,
Right.
veggies, all that. So, and you still get a little bit of like the healthy olive oil fat and the healthy butter fat. And yeah. So I love meals like that.
And it'll keep you full until dinner time. You're going
Yeah.
to have the energy to accomplish whatever it is you need to do for the day.
Yeah.
You have the brain power to
Yeah.
get through the day.
Yeah. It does help keep you full. And my biggest downfall is I never drink enough water.
That tends to be a downfall for a lot of people.
Yeah. I was just talking to a coworker this morning who's doing kind of a mental challenge, and it has some physical components to it. But one of the things is, getting a certain amount of exercise every day, not crazy, but just a realistic amount.
Yeah.
And then drinking a gallon of water a day.
Oh, really?
And I literally was like, oh, I could not do that.
That's a lot of water.
Yeah. I don't think I could do that. It's a good challenge, but no.
Yeah, that's a lot of water. I believe off the top of my head, females need about 11 cups of fluid a day. And like 9 of those should come from fluid itself. And then you can get the rest from food. So if you can kind of aim for something like that, and if you don't like water, you can do other things. Use like a Crystal Light mixed with it, or you can put drops in it.
I do that a lot. I like those water flavoring drops because it just makes it a little bit more enjoyable to drink.
Yeah, that's what I do too.
But yeah.
And really cold. Some people like it really cold with ice. That's helpful.
So in your experience as a nutritionist, is there or are there diets out there or diet plans that exist that are wholesome and beneficial and sustainable for long term? Like if someone says, I'm really struggling, I want to change this permanently, but I need some structure. I need someone else to do the lifting for me and tell me what I can eat because I don't know. I'm not a nutritionist.
There are, but I wouldn't call them diets.
Okay.
I would call them healthy eating plans. It's a lifestyle change. And you can find things like the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics has a website that you can go to that you can find all sorts of information on there.
Yeah.
My Plate. You can go into myplate.gov. You can put in your gender, your age, your current weight, your activity level, and it will give you all of that information.
Okay.
It'll tell you
how many calories you should be shooting for.
How many calories to shoot for. If you want to lose weight, then you can subtract a little bit. If you need to gain weight, you can add a little bit to it. It gives you diet plans. You can find recipes. So there are definitely reputable websites out there that you can look at. Oftentimes, hospitals will have, if you just Google the hospital, I usually use Cleveland Clinic as an example, or you could use UPMC and just put in like a 2,000 calorie diet.
Yeah.
And that you could get information from there. It's a good starting place.
Yeah.
And then looking at food labels, check the nutrition labels, it tells you what the recommended serving size is.
Yeah.
The problem is
that's the key.
Yeah, that's the problem.
You mean like a whole bag of like Doritos is not a serving size?
No.
You get like 10 chips, I think, in a serving size or something. It's actually more than you think because I really like calorie counting because for me, I can eat whatever I want. Nothing is off the table. I just know if I have more calories in like a treat item, that I want to be a little bit more careful in, the rest of the day or whatever. But for me, that's been the thing that's most sustainable, because I do have some macros I like to hit. I do like to hit a certain level of protein because I feel better when I do. But I don't really care about how much sugar, other things that I have, because I know if I'm within these calorie guidelines that are healthy for me, I'm probably going to hit most of those in a normal range.
Yes.
And so it's just a good way for me to stay on track. I don't count every day, because now I've learned what works and what generally is a portion size that I should be eating. So it's really helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. Calorie counting is hard. It takes time.
Yeah. But I use an app.
Right. There are apps out there.
So much easier.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you can pretty much look up anything and it can tell you, how many calories.
And now restaurants more and more are putting on like calories. Like you can go to an Applebee's, for instance, and it will tell you, I think on all of their menu items, how many calories or what the calorie range is. So you could say, well, I want a burger. I really feel like a burger, but I'm not going to get cheese and mayo on it because I know those add a lot of calories that I don't want, but then I can still enjoy my burger or whatever.
Yeah. And that was actually government mandated several years ago, where all of the restaurants need to publish that information. And it was to help with the obesity epidemic, and also to help our kids, because children have been getting larger over the years.
Yeah.
Diabetes has increased with young children because of their weight and their inactivity. So it was a way that the government felt like, and the food industry felt, that they could maybe help parents in terms of knowing what to eat, and then also just for us to look at it. So... But you really hit on the nail. There's no good food or bad food.
Yeah.
You can eat pretty much anything you want.
Yeah.
As long as you're eating in moderation and balance and a variety.
Right.
All 5 food groups.
Yeah. And after we had our way back, the original time when you and Jody came on with Tim and I to talk about nutrition, it was funny because I was listening to that podcast and I heard things that we talked about that I hadn't registered when we were recording it.
Okay.
And I realized I think I have a gluten intolerance.
Oh, really?
It's not an allergy for sure. And I've tried going completely gluten-free, and it seems like I can have some gluten. So I call myself gluten light. I don't completely get rid of it. If I'm at a restaurant and they have really good homemade bread, you better believe I'm going to have a little bit. But I do try to have less of it, simply because I know it makes me feel not so great. And so I do think just being in tune with, when you keep a little bit of a food diary, it helps you recognize patterns. Like, oh, you know what? I had a lot of caffeine the other day and I had a headache the next day. Maybe there's a relationship there, or whatever that is. I do think that can be really helpful. Just sort of keeping track. Maybe say for 6 weeks, I'm going to keep track and just kind of see where my scale goes, see how my clothes fit, see if I'm bloated, not bloated, whatever that is.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you. That's a great way. Journaling is an excellent way to stay on track, and not only to see how you're feeling in terms of after you eat, also it's a good way to learn to eat with your intuitive eating habits.
Okay.
So you want to learn, I'm hungry, I want to eat, I'm full, I want to stop.
Yeah.
And when you're journaling, you can put in there, at 10 o'clock, I was really hungry, so I had this.
Yeah.
Or at 10 o'clock, I came out of a meeting and I was really frustrated.
Yeah.
So I ate this.
Yeah.
Because we need to get back to that feeling of eat when you're hungry, stop when you're full.
Yeah.
And a lot of us didn't learn that as kids.
Oh, I 100% didn't learn that because we were told to clean our plates.
Yeah, you're in the clean plate club.
Yes.
And we don't want to do that anymore because then it's visual cues.
Yeah.
And that's when we're learning, I have to finish whatever's on here, even though I am stuffed and I don't want any more.
Yeah. It's really hard. And as parents, I remember parenting my kids, like I didn't necessarily instill the best eating habits in them because I didn't have the best eating habits. But one thing I did try really hard to do was not make them clean their plates. And when I would prepare a meal, I would make sure I had something on the table that all the kids would eat. But I didn't cater to that. Like I wanted them to try new things. They were not forced to eat or finish anything. I would really strongly encourage, please try at least try something of everything. So if
Yeah.
it's fish or it's a vegetable, I would let my kids dip their vegetables in ranch. If that was the only way they ate them, I didn't care. I wasn't going to fight that battle.
Right.
But the one rule that we did have was if you don't eat anything at dinner, the kitchen is closed. You're not going to starve. You'll be fine going through the night and waking up tomorrow and eating something. But we're not going to go back over and over to the kitchen to snack. My kids did not starve. They had plenty of snacks during the day. They had healthy options. They had unhealthy options. But that was kind of the deal at dinner time. I know that there's something here that everybody will eat, whether it's a tater tot or a roll or something. So you're not going to starve. But if you choose not to eat what's been, provided, then kitchen's closed.
Yes.
And we stuck to that pretty well, I think. But it's hard. It's because you're trying to come up with things that your kids want to eat, and kids naturally want to eat maybe stuff that's not quite as nutritive. And even my kids had friends who their families were very strict, like no sugar, no dairy, no processed foods. And I'm telling you, when those kids went to their friends' houses,
Yep.
they ate all of the stuff.
Yep.
So.
It was too restrictive and it backfires.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you can't control what the kids are going to eat at somebody else's house or at school.
Yeah.
You might pack a healthy lunch for them, but they're trading.
Oh my word,
know?
we totally traded lunches. I know nobody ever wanted to trade with me. I had crappy lunches, but that's because we couldn't afford good food. With a lot of bologna sandwiches.
Yes.
Yeah.
You do what you can do, but
Yeah.
you hope to establish healthy eating habits early in life.
Yeah.
Because we stick with those, whether we realize it or not.
Yes.
As we go into adulthood and beyond.
Yeah.
And some of it's based on not necessarily what we were fed, but comfort foods.
Yes.
So males and females tend to eat differently because males, if you ask them what's your comfort food, a lot of times it's steak and potato or fried chicken. And that might go back to my mom made great fried chicken every Sunday. Most females would not answer that as being their favorite foods.
Yeah.
And again, the media influences that.
Yeah.
The media influences our gender choices, which leads to the fad dieting.
Yeah, I also think you sort of have to recognize what kind of eater you are. I am a snacker. I don't really sit down and eat huge quantities of food. And that's, snacking, that's not a bad thing, but it can be a bad thing if you're constantly grazing throughout the day, not even thinking about it. So I have to be mindful of, I know I like to snack. So what are healthy options that I can snack on and still feel like I've been able to satisfy that urge, but I'm not, over consuming. And so I have, different things that I'll keep in the office or bring with me, like even just like celery and carrot sticks. I love to munch on those. And those are good options for me because they're not high in sugar, salt, and all of the things that I don't want to be high in, but I'm still able to feel like I can munch on something. My husband is not a snacker at all. He is totally like what you said, meat and potato. I mean, he likes all foods, but meat and potatoes, and he can sit down. He cannot eat all day if he knows he's going out for a nice meal and not feel in any way that he's missed out on anything, and then sit down and eat a huge meal.
Oh, wow.
I cannot do that.
No.
I mean, I'm like breakfast, lunch, dinner, small snack here and there. So, and I won't eat a huge meal. I'll take half of it home because I just can't. But I think knowing what kind of eater you are and then planning for that is really helpful.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Making sure that you have food in the house, snacks in the house for yourself and for your kids is like the first part of the battle because there's nothing worse than going to the cupboard or the freezer and being like, oh, this is what we're going to have for dinner. And then I don't have that ingredient. Or so then you may throw together something that's maybe not quite as healthy or you go out and everybody's, fast
worst.
food. Yeah.
We go out as a culture.
We do.
So much. Like as a kid, we never went out.
No.
Like if I remember McDonald's had this thing when I was a kid that if you had an A on your report card, you would get a free hamburger.
Okay.
And so that was always a treat when my report card came out. My dad would say, let's see. And if I had an A, we would go out for lunch like on a Saturday. And we would get, I would get a hamburger and small fries and a small drink. That was a huge treat.
Yes.
We did not do that regularly. And so the frequency with which our family has eaten out, we didn't do it so much when our kids were small, just for budget reasons, but it's a lot more now. But, my husband and I often will share a meal and, we try to, within the context of restaurant food, make good choices.
But it's so much easier now.
So much.
You have DoorDash.
Yeah,
You know,
I don't do DoorDash.
You don't even have. I don't
refuse.
either. But
no, I'm not against DoorDash. Don't get me wrong.
No.
I just don't want to pay to do something I can do myself.
Yeah,
So.
but they just make it very easy for you. You know?
They do. I've got a couple kids who are big Door Dashers, and they're like, I budget for it because I love it so much.
Yeah. Yep.
But
you know, the whole culture has changed. And also think about portion distortion.
Yeah.
You know, when you went to McDonald's, what did they have? They probably just had that little hamburger, right?
They did. I think as a kid, even they probably did have, I don't know when Big Macs came around. They did probably have them, but I mean, we weren't going to get a Big Mac.
No.
We just wouldn't.
Yeah.
Yeah. And even now, if I go to I still love McDonald's. I mean, I'm not ashamed to say it. I'm a big McDonald's girl. A McDonald's Diet Coke is as crispy gets. And we're doing a podcast episode on Diet Coke one of these days. But I still, if I'm going to go to McDonald's, I get a hamburger and a small fry and like a Diet Coke, and I'm completely satisfied with that. Mm-hmm. Do I want a bite of someone's Big Mac? Yes, I do, because man, they're good. But
yeah,
I would never order one because it's just too much.
But it's changed in terms of what's being offered too. Portion sizes have gotten bigger and bigger and bigger.
Have.
And that's what the expectation is.
It is.
You know,
you feel like you're getting ripped off because prices have also gone up because of everything that's happened in the last 4 or 5 years economically.
Yeah.
And so you feel like, well, dang it, if I'm paying $15, I better get a huge plate of fries with my sandwich. And
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
I can remember when my kids were in high school, they both played basketball and soccer. So we would take the boys afterwards and some of their teammates, and we would go out like to Wendy's. Usually that was a good place to stop on the way home from games.
Yeah.
And at the time, I'm not sure they still have it. They had a quadruple burger.
Oh.
So yeah, it was a quadruple burger with, I think it had 3 slices of bun and bacon. And the thing was, ooh, which one of us can eat this?
Right.
And they all could.
Well, yeah, because they were burning a million calories a day and they were young.
Yeah. But I'm sitting there watching them thinking, oh my gosh, do you know how many calories? Do you know how much fat you're eating?
Yes.
But,
yeah. Well, do it when you're young because you can't do it when you're older.
No, it's just the way it is.
Well, we were talking about meal planning. My daughter has done something that I think is just so incredibly smart. She's using ChatGPT. So she's newly married. Her husband is one of those who can sit down and just consume a massive quantity of food. I mean, he's very fit, but he's young. He won't always be able to do that.
Yes.
But she's very much like I am. And she's like, I just run out of ideas of what to cook. So she tells ChatGPT very specific things. You know, here's our age. It's a married couple. Here's our budget that we want to spend on a weekly basis. I would like 3 hot meals that I can make in the evening that make enough leftovers for 2 people to take them to work every day for 5 days. And don't worry about the weekends. And I shop at, here's the local stores that I shop at. And we have no food allergies. And so she gives all of these specific things, and it'll create a menu plan.
Isn't that amazing?
And a shopping list, and tell her how much she's going to spend at our local Aldi or Giant Eagle or Walmart, wherever she's shopping. And I'm like, that's so smart, because if you have dietary restrictions, food allergies, budgetary restrictions, as everybody does, or you don't like red meat, or you don't eat whatever, you can give it all of those very specific instructions, and it can do that for you. And so it can take at least some of the work out of things that are maybe tedious. I mean, you're doing that every week or every month.
Yeah.
I love that idea.
I do too. I mean, there are apps out there on the phone or, you know, on your computer that you could use, but that kind of takes it a step further and makes it that much more streamlined.
Yes.
Oh, that's a great idea.
I mean, I thought she was brilliant for doing that. So you heard it here if she's listening. I think she's really smart. I know for me, I have certain things that are treats for me that I have to have. I have to have some chocolate. Like I just do. So I get these little, chocolate caramel sea salt things actually from Aldi. They're delicious. And I have 1 or 2 like a day, typically not every day, but like that's a big treat for me. I really enjoy it. And I don't feel like I've killed my diet or my daily plan of what I want to get done.
Right.
I'm using diet really in the sense of like just an eating plan.
Yes.
Because this is just the way I want to eat perpetually. But I mean, we do associate diet with
Negative.
a short term thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
I know. I'm the same way. The little Dove minis, the dark chocolate.
Yes.
One of those satisfies.
Yeah.
And that's really the key. People, you don't have to sit down and eat a huge piece of chocolate cake or, a huge candy bar. After 1 or 2 bites, if you stop, most of the time you're going to realize that satisfied me.
Yeah.
I'm okay with that.
And for me, having just like, I don't buy full-size candy bars. I love Snickers, so I'll buy the little mini ones. And that way I can have one. I know exactly how many calories it is. And because I don't have to stop myself, I can just eat the whole thing and it's fine.
Right.
So I think finding those little ways that you can manage to enjoy the things that you really want to enjoy without overindulging or, being regretful afterward because you had too much. But, there are times we do indulge. We go on vacation, we enjoy ourselves. And part of the fun on vacation for us is eating local foods. And so we enjoy them. We try not to go crazy.
Right.
But we, if there's a local donut place, we're going to go try a local donut or whatever that is.
Yeah.
Seafood. Yeah.
Yeah. I could pass on the donuts, but if there's local ice cream, I'm there.
Yeah.
That's my downfall. But, it's the 90% of the time you're going to eat healthy. 10%, you're going to treat yourself.
Yes.
And maybe have some things that are not quite as healthy, but they're not forbidden.
Right.
And you don't need to feel guilty after you eat them.
Yeah.
And that's the whole thing with the fad diets. You work so hard with those fad diets to follow whatever it is you're supposed to restrict and stay away from. And truthfully, I think most people, when they're on them, they are cranky. They're tired. You just don't feel good because you're not getting enough energy. You're not getting the right nutrients. Your body doesn't feel good, and then you go off of it. Whereas if you just decide, I'm going to establish a healthy eating pattern, it becomes actually so much easier. And you can live with it for the rest of your life.
Yeah. 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 I think too, I would say to someone who's really struggling to find out or to figure out how to do that, there are apps, ChatGPT, there's plenty of stuff on websites, but go to your doctor and talk to your doctor and say, I'm really struggling with this. We're living in an age too, where we now have GLP-1s, fairly available. There's always the cost issue and insurance issue, but they're doing a lot of studies on those. GLP-1s have been around for a couple of decades. These are just newer iterations, and they're finding a lot of really positive things about them. And so that can be a workable solution. Some people feel like that's cheating. I don't feel that way. I've used one and it was life-changing for me, and it really helped me to be able to live the way that I wanted to live and not be sort of like enthralled to food. It really helped me to learn the good habits that I needed to then carry on. So I'm not giving any advice. I'm not a doctor, but that's where your doctor can step in and say, you're vitamin deficient, and this vitamin could make a lot of changes for you and how you feel, or suggest small ways that you can get movement into your life. Like, if we have where our office is, we can go out and walk on a nice day. So there are several people who will say, hey, I'm going to go walk for 15 minutes. Right. I'm not going to sweat because I'm wearing my work clothes and tennis shoes, but I want to go and move my body and get some fresh air and get some vitamin D. I feel like if we could just make some small changes, that all of those small changes can actually lead to big dividends down the road.
And that's the problem. We're an instant gratification society. It's not going to be instant if you're trying to change your eating habits and you're trying to improve your lifestyle. But the small changes do add up. So if you start here and a year later look back, you'll be amazed at how much has changed. And I'm going to go one step further and advocate for my profession as a registered dietitian. Most doctors, they may have one nutrition course. And they can give you the general information. But don't be afraid to say to them, could I have a referral to a dietitian? Or you can get on the eatright.org website and you can find local dietitians who do counseling, because that's really our expertise. So you work hand in hand with your doctor, with the dietitian, and then also maybe some type of a lifestyle coach or, somebody who does exercise physiology, just to get you started in the right direction.
Sure. And try different things. Like you may hate jogging, just fine. I hate jogging. But you might try a Pilates class and love it, or Zumba, or find a group of friends to go walking with, or whatever.
Yeah.
I think that's a great idea is finding people who are experts in their field, and who, I think some people have the idea that registered dietitians and nutritionists are like drill sergeants and they're going to make your life miserable. And that's not the goal at all.
No, it's definitely not the goal.
You're trying to empower people.
We want to empower people. We want to come alongside you. We want to find out, how do you typically eat? And let's start from there.
Yeah.
What small changes can we make?
Yeah.
In order to improve your lifestyle, you know? And I used to work for a dialysis company. And so whenever we would have new patients who would come in to start dialysis, I would introduce myself and say, I'm the dietitian. They would say, I don't want to talk to you. I can't eat anything. You know, I got this list at the hospital that says stay away from, avoid. And I'd be like, all right, let's stop and start fresh, because there's nothing that you totally have to avoid.
Yeah.
We can work things in.
Yeah.
And that's where we come from as a dietitian, to try to come alongside the clients and help lift them up and improve their lifestyle.
Yeah. And I've met so many people who get on this way of eating. They're like, oh, I'm completely plant-based now and I'm never going to go back. And you should go plant-based too. That's the problem. If you love eating plant-based, that's great. If it makes you feel good and it makes you healthy and it's a lifestyle that you can embrace and live within, that's wonderful. But you know what? I don't want to be plant-based. And I'm not less than somebody else simply because I'm choosing a different way forward. And so I think that's really key as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's not black and white.
It's not.
You know,
it's
it used to be you were a vegetarian or you weren't a vegetarian. You can be a flexitarian.
Yeah.
A couple days, maybe you don't eat meat at all, and then you decide you want to have a steak.
Yep.
You know,
Absolutely.
there's no right or wrong.
I think it's wrong not to eat steak. I'm kidding. I love a good steak. Yeah. But yeah, I think that that's so true. And I do love, you had mentioned earlier, it's that we've made great strides in body positivity. You know, I love going to a local department store and seeing mannequins of different sizes, because, you know, I didn't fit the little teeny tiny girl growing up. And it was hard on my psyche to go into a juniors department and find jeans, and none of them fit me because I had curves and, you know, I wasn't built in this like tiny little ideal, I guess, at the time. And, you know, we as Americans or as a culture, we can go too far the other way. It's also not okay to look at someone who's really, really overweight and unhealthy and say, you do you. You know, we need to address our physical problems, whether we need to gain weight or lose weight or get more fit or, you know, drink less or smoke less, whatever that is. It's important to address those things as well.
Yes.
To try to find a true health and fitness, you know, ideal as much as possible. But at the same time, to recognize we are all built differently, and that's a good thing.
Yes.
You don't want to get to the end of your life and realize that you spent decades hating yourself.
Right.
Or wishing you were different.
Right.
You know, like, you know, maybe be a little gentle on ourselves. And it's okay to not fit into some pie in the sky ideal.
Yes. Well, and whose ideal is it?
Right.
You know,
Yeah,
it's the media
exactly.
ideal. It's the dieting industry ideal. It's not our ideal. And even when you look at, it used to be that when you looked at like weight charts, it would be the ideal body weight.
Yeah.
That's been changed now.
Oh,
It's
okay.
more a healthy body weight is what we're aiming for.
Yeah.
Because you're right. People are built differently. And just because the scale says that you are overweight, that doesn't necessarily mean that's true. You might have a lot more muscle than somebody else. You're just a bigger build than somebody else.
Yeah.
The key is, how do you feel? What do your numbers look like? You know, are you able to be active the way that you want to be active?
Yeah.
You know, are you getting all the nutrients that you need so that your body is fueled properly?
Yeah.
That's the key.
Yeah.
You know, weight is just a number.
Yeah, and like you said, that there are other things that can gauge health besides the number on the scale. You know, are you sleeping well? Are you feeling the energy that you can run after your kids or run after your grandkids or put in a full day of work without feeling just exhausted at the end of the day? Are you able to focus? Do you have that mental focus and acuity that you want to have? Yeah, so I think that there are so many non-scale ways to gauge where you are in that health and fitness journey.
Yeah.
But yeah, these fad diets, even now you see fitness like gurus on social media and the stuff that they say is just, not all of them, but a lot of them, it's crazy.
It's crazy. There's a lot of diets. There's a lot of products out there that you need to be aware of. The fat burners, the detox diets. You don't need to detox because your body does it for you.
Yeah.
That's what your liver and your kidneys do. So, you just need to be aware because fad diets can be sneaky. When you look at it, you might think, oh, this looks like it could be a really healthy thing to do. And I'm going to drop some weight fast.
Yeah.
And I don't have to exercise to do it. If you see anything like that, run the other way.
Yeah. Seriously.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, my mom never liked to be in photos because she really struggled with body image. And we did get her in photos, which I'm very thankful for because she's no longer with us. And I think, you know what? Put the swimsuit on. Get yourself in beach photos. Be in the Christmas photos. Be present. And don't let that, we all have things we want to change our whole lives about us.
Right.
We want to be smarter, faster, slimmer, more fit. We want to be better read. We want to be more informed on politics, whatever. But you're never going to hit perfect.
No.
Perfect is not the goal.
No.
Healthy and content is the goal. And the lies we tell ourselves are things that probably the people who love us don't even think about. My friends are not friends with me because of my jean size.
No.
They're not. So yeah,
That's true.
I think, back to like my kids' weddings, I didn't look the exact way that I wished I looked, or I couldn't wear the thing that I thought I wanted to wear. But you know what? I'm wearing a big old smile in those photos because they were such happy, fun days. And there's no way I wasn't going to be just, lit from within and in those photos. And they're capturing a moment in time. My friend's a photographer and she takes a lot of senior photos. And she's so sad sometimes because the parents will say, okay, these are great. The proofs are great, but I want you to Photoshop the braces off and get rid of all of the acne and freckles. And can you make her hair a little more highlighted? Can you remove this from him? Can you make him a little slimmer? And she's like, you're taking away the moment in time. We're not worried about perfection. It's
right.
It's not the photos, that you want to post on social media. This is your kid, who he is, who she is in this moment, and embrace that and enjoy that. And you know what? In 10 or 20 or 30 years, sure, you might look back and say, oh my gosh, it was so dorky. Look at the braces. But you want to look at that. You want to see what you look like.
See those memories.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And then you can show your kids and they can tell you how dorky you looked at that point in time.
Hey, we're all going to be dorky. We've all been dorky.
Yep.
That's a rite of passage. And if you don't, look dorky at some point in your life, you're just missing out. So,
that's right.
Yeah.
That is very true.
Yeah. Any final words of wisdom for us?
Well, and this is kind of off the top of my head. I didn't do a lot of research into it, but as we're talking, I'm thinking about Irma Bombeck. Do you remember Irma Bombeck?
I do. Yep.
And I can remember, I think she was in her 70s. She was diagnosed with cancer. And she said, I spent all those years concerned about what I look like, about my body size. Just enjoy the moment and be grateful.
Yeah, that's great advice. And I can't think of a better way to wrap up. So thanks for joining us. This is great. I hope people enjoyed the little quiz and hearing about banter way back then, creating the diet fad idea. But yeah, so thanks for joining us. It was really fun.
Thanks for having me. It was a good time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us today. I hope that you learned as much as I did. If you'd like to learn more about anything that we talked about today or learn more about the podcast, you can check us out on socials. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. And hopefully we will see you next time.